So, hello, listeners, to the Wholehearted Leadership Podcast. Once again, today we have a great guest, and I'm really excited to be speaking with her. She is Neeta Lachmandas.
Hi, Cohen. How are you?
I'm very, very, very good. How have you been since we last met?
Oh, really good. I never realized how many people you know who actually reached out to me and they were like, "Oh my God, you met Cohen." So there you go. I was with some sort of a celebrity and I didn't even know it. So
You're very, very humble. I'm just lucky to have met many people. And let me tell you a little bit more about Neeta. She is the founder of Conscious Service. Prior to that, she's been in the private sector, public sector, academia, and she was at the Singapore Management University heading the Institute of Service Excellence. She was also the Assistant Chief Executive of the Singapore Tourism Board. And she's got such a great illustrious career, but she graduated as a lawyer,
yep.
but she didn't practice law.
Yep.
So welcome, Neeta, to the Wholehearted Leadership Podcast.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. It really is. Yeah.
So, Neeta, typically we start our podcast by asking our guests, what does wholehearted leadership mean to you?
Mm-hmm. I guess for me, wholehearted leadership is about the ability of the leader to bring out the best in the people that work with them, not for them, with them. A wholehearted leader, I think, understands that you can only achieve your goals if you are in sync with your team, and that people that work with you are not expected to leave one part of themselves at home when they come into the office, right? So, how do you understand and how do you appreciate the fact that whatever is happening to the people that you work with outside of the office is actually going to have implications on the way they work with you? So your ability to appreciate them as a whole person makes you a wholehearted leader.
I love it. I love that definition of wholehearted leadership, and I really like the word appreciate as well, especially as a appreciative inquiry practitioner. I think people just really want to be appreciated.
Totally agree with you on that.
Love it.
Yeah.
And if wholehearted leadership is so important, right, then what do you think are the barriers for leaders serving wholeheartedly?
Yeah, that's a question that I've asked myself so many times because obviously in my entire career, I've seen the gamut of leaders, right? I've seen the leaders who display a lot of empathy, and I've seen the leaders who take maybe a more hard authoritarian style of leadership. Now, I'm not suggesting that wholehearted leadership means that you're not a strong leader or that you put your foot down. When you need to be hard, you have to be hard. Sometimes the situation calls for it. But I think a wholehearted leader understands that people are a makeup of many, many things. And in order to bring out the best in people, we need to understand them and we need to have a lot of empathy for them. So one of the things that always kind of upsets me a little bit is this misunderstanding of empathy. People just think empathy is weak. And I think that there is a prevailing feeling that to show empathy and to be wholehearted perhaps is sometimes mistaken for being a weak leader. Yeah. And it's a shame because there is so much you can get out of your team if you show them some empathy, I think, and some understanding. Yeah.
Oh, wow. It's like empathy, right? We already started the conversation, right? Empathy is one of our key pillars of a wholehearted leadership. And I believe that very often we buy into this whole narrative, right, that the business world is like a battlefield.
Correct.
And it's time for us to really change this narrative. Like,
Correct.
how can we continue to use, battlefield and wartime analogies
Mm-hmm.
to describe leadership in the business
Mm-hmm.
world?
Correct. Correct. And I mean, I totally agree with you, because I think labeling is so important, right?
Yeah,
Labeling sends a signal to our brain
yeah,
that we need to come in a certain way. We need
Oh,
to show up in a certain
yes,
way, Um, and I do feel that one of you see the thing about empathy is empathy also brings a lot of trust.
mm,
And trust, I think, brings out the best in people. People who feel trusted
Oh,
feel that they need to live up to the trust,
mm,
So when in all the 25 years that I've worked, right,
mm,
I've seen a lot of leaders that are very worried about giving trust.
mm,
So we've had many discussions even before COVID about allowing people to work from home, allowing people to work from anywhere. And the prevailing, a lot of my directors, the ones that reported to me, would say, no, I don't know if they're working. I will not know if they're working. And I was like, if you don't give trust, you're not going to get the trust back
yeah,
to you as well. This idea that trust needs to be earned. Um, I feel that it's time for us to maybe rethink
mm,
whether it's only a one-way dimension, because trust actually needs to be earned. Not just the superior needs to earn trust, but the person that works for you needs to also trust you, and
Yep.
you need to earn their trust as well.
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the most important learnings for me, which I actually refer to in my book, is we talk a lot, right? I mean, today we talk a lot about digital, and then the need for collaboration, and the need for this and the need for that, which are all 100% correct, extremely important.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack over there in that
Yeah.
conversation in itself, right? I mean, trust. I think people feel empowered when you trust them.
Correct.
Right? People feel that they are given a runway where they can really, be themselves, like you mentioned, and so that they are able to, show their true selves at work, right? They feel safe. I think where a lot of trust is all about, do I feel safe here? Do I feel a sense of belonging here?
Yes.
And will I be accepted here?
Yes.
And will I matter?
Correct.
And I think that really is the formula of trust, right? I think the word we use the word trust so loosely. We throw the word around quite a fair bit, but we don't really understand what it means to trust.
No.
But the ability to engender a sense of belonging, safety,
Correct.
and mattering is what
Correct.
trust is about.
Correct. Because everybody that comes to the workplace wants to feel that they are valued. They want to feel that their opinions are valued, that they have something to contribute. Yet what do? We create this environment where they are fearful to speak up. And then what happens? There's groupthink. The leader says something, everybody feels obliged to agree with the leader, because they don't sense that there is an environment where there is a lot of appreciation of diversity, diverse views, and then that starts to belittle trust, because then I keep my mouth shut and I don't say anything, and slowly the trust kind of gets less and less and less.
Yeah.
What was quite interesting to me when I was at the STB was one of the persons that worked in my team. One day I got an email from her, and she said, Neeta, I just want to point out to you that today you didn't handle that meeting really well. You didn't hear the perspectives of the people that were sitting in the meeting. She said, you could have listened to their perspectives a bit more. And I think what was interesting to me was that she trusted me enough to send me an email like this, and to think that I was not going to hold, and I certainly would not have held it against her. I was actually very, very appreciative, because you can be the leader of the entire world, you are still going to have blind spots.
Yes.
There are things that you will not see, and to actually have a team of people that report to you, that feel that they can come to you and be honest with you about how you can be a better leader to everybody, is such a blessing, isn't it? It really is a blessing. So, but it's because I suppose I have worked hard to build a culture of trust, and psychological safety, that I don't hold it against people to point out things that are my blind spots. So that was interesting to me. And subsequently, when I had a conversation with her and when I had coffee with her, I said I really, really appreciated it, because you made me a better leader by pointing out things that perhaps I may not have noticed. Yeah.
And you also made a better leader by appreciating her and acknowledging her for having the courage to speak up to you.
Absolutely.
It really would have encouraged her and empowered her to continue doing that in the future, knowing that sometimes people will also feel like, oh, is that something that's accepted here? I think in one of our previous podcast episodes with one of our previous guests on the Wholehearted Leadership Podcast, Stephen Shetleski, he wrote a book about speak up culture, and I really like the simple formula that he shared about speaking up. People are always asking themselves two things. The first thing is it safe to speak up?
Correct.
And the second thing is it worthwhile to speak up?
Correct. 100%.
So if people are slaughtered and not safe to speak up, they won't. But secondly, even if you tell them, hey, you know what? There's psychological safety. It's safe to speak up here. Or the typical phrase that leaders always say, my room is always open for you.
Yes.
Right? But people never show up. Nobody walks through that door. Because why? Because people feel that, oh, you know what? It's futile. I want to go back a little to the earlier conversation that we had around, the psychological safety for your team member to bring it up to you. How did you arrive at this? Is it something that you always had, or is it something that you need to really train yourself to embrace, negative feedback from your subordinates?
I think now I'm going back like 25 years, right? I have practiced meditation and positive visualization for over 25 years. And I really do think that it has had an impact on me, the ability to maybe put some distance, not take everything so personally, and the ability to see what I need to be as a leader from a distance, I think has helped. But I don't know. I think it's because I really, really believe that creating camaraderie is one of the most important aspects of a successful team, building a successful team. But how do you create camaraderie if you don't create trust? So I think it emanates from a very, very deep held belief that I've had, and I suppose the fact that I have practiced certain mindful practices has perhaps helped in the process as well. I'm not sure why I treat my team in a slightly different way, but certainly the feedback has come to me from team members when they move to another organization or they move to another team. They miss that sense of camaraderie and they miss that sense of trust. The other thing I've observed is that if the leader builds this sense of camaraderie and this sense of trust, then the team members start to build it amongst themselves as well. One of the things I observed when I was in leadership was that actually a lot of leaders don't trust one another. And if the leadership teams don't trust one another, or the leaders don't trust one another because, everybody is trying to be top dog, I guess. Everybody is, everybody is highly competent and ambitious. How do you expect your teams to collaborate and work with one another? You
Yeah.
know, because your teams are observing how the leaders behave. You know, and if the leaders do not behave by trusting one another, and there's friction, then you can expect that that friction is also going to translate its way down. You know, it's only natural. So the leaders who then spout, oh yes, we believe in collaboration, we believe in this, we believe in that. Maybe do you really, or is the expectation my teams should collaborate, but I'm not? You know, I mean, I believe a lot of leaders need to actually look in the mirror and look at their own and look at themselves as well.
This is beautiful, and I hear you mentioning trust and camaraderie a lot. It seems like that's something that matters a lot to you. And if I may, take a little bit of a risk and take you back to a time when you were perhaps a child or when you were growing up. Was there a lot? Did you grow up in an environment that has a lot of safety and belonging cues, or was that something that you was
Mm,
bereft of?
I I grew up in a big family. I have 5 siblings, and I'm the youngest.
Oh,
So maybe I was extremely loved, extremely babied, and I guess I felt a lot of trust, right? Because I had a lot of older siblings that looked out for my interest as well. Um, my father passed away when I was only 16 years old. That was a very very big shock to my system, and that has had a huge impact on my life. The need, I think, for I don't think it in any way eroded my sense of trust, or siblingness. In fact, it probably grew it. You know, but I suppose I've grown up in an environment where there was a lot of love, and there was a lot of display, and there was a lot of passion, and there was a lot of argument, and there was a lot of, we were not the kind of family where we kept our thoughts to ourselves. We and I when I come to the leadership space, I feel like that's exactly the way we should build a team. People should feel free to disagree.
mm,
People should feel that it's not going to be held against them, and people should definitely understand that we are all different team members, but we have more in common than we have distinctions between us. We work for the same organization. We actually have the same objectives. Um, so that to me has always been the way I have wanted to build my teams.
so that's so beautiful. That's so
Now,
beautiful.
but I do want to stress though, because it used to come back to me as well,
Yeah.
that someone once said to me, Nita, but people say you're not a very strong leader, and I
Mm.
and I and I would say, well, I don't know. Maybe I'm not, but really, what is the definition of strength? Because if we meet our objectives, and every year our team does well, and we meet what we want to do, and people are happy, I'll live with the fact that some people think that being a trusting leader is a sign of weakness. Then that's fine. You can't win everybody over, right? So um it's back to this conversation that society, I think, does feel that strength, the visual impression that people have of strength
Mm.
is somebody who is hard nosed,
Mm.
who is, I don't know, not very, empathy is seen as being perhaps too giving, and not having, it's going to give you an advantage in this doggy eat dog kind of business world. Yeah.
I understand that you graduated from law as a lawyer,
Yes.
but you didn't you didn't pursue a career very much in law. And I see some of your background, right? You worked in airline, you worked in the public sector, the private sector, you work in academia. So you have had a varied experience, right? A real whole kaleidoscope of experience here.
Yeah.
So kind
Yeah.
of bring us through your career journey and your thought process behind it.
Yeah. I studied law because my siblings were lawyers. So, it was, I was 18. I didn't even really think about it, right? I went into law school. Um, and it was great learning, but I knew very, very quickly this is not what I want to spend my life doing. I'm not here for the money. There were many of my peers, my classmates, who were very singular in knowing what they wanted, and unfortunately, I was not one of those. My life was, I think, destined to meander a lot more. Um, but I knew that I wanted to do something. I guess at that time, I defined it as fun, and advertising sounded like fun. Later on, and then from advertising, I moved on to loyalty marketing. I moved on to all kinds of things in the advertising and marketing space, which then eventually brought me to the Singapore Tourism Board, because I handled a lot of customers in my life prior, and then I came in as the Director of Service Quality, which then started my whole journey with service excellence, right? Um, only years later did I actually, kind of connect the dots.
Yeah.
And I was like, the hunger to understand people and to understand consumers, not people, but consumers, has been that thread, I think, in my journey. Like, why do consumers stay with you? Why do they buy? What motivates them? Which started when we were when I was in advertising, and
Yeah.
has come all the way until today, right? Um, was it a wasted degree? I mean, the you'd be surprised the number of people that ask me like, oh, why you didn't do law? Why you didn't be a lawyer? You would have made so much money, And I'm like, maybe I would have made more. I don't know. But you know what? I didn't do too badly either. And I'd like to think that I've had a fairly illustrious career in the process as well. There is no one way to achieve what you want to achieve.
I actually think that studying law, right, has bestowed upon you this ability to interpret things.
I agree.
And I think a lot of times people think that lawyers just follow the books black and white, but a lot of law, right, a lot of like what is statutory law, right, is also very highly open to interpretation.
I agree.
And I think your ability to interpret things has also stood you in good stead.
I agree. And in my first job in the advertising industry, that was the feedback that was always given to me, that I looked at an issue from multiple perspectives, and that stood me in very good stead. And I credit my legal training, I think, to that. So, as a university degree, it was the best. It was the best. But did it mean that I had to be a lawyer? No, maybe not. There were a lot of learnings in there that I have applied in the course of my career. It taught me the single biggest lesson that I think has stood me, has defined. It taught me the single biggest lesson that has been most valuable for my career, and that is the ability to manage people. So I was in account management, and I think it taught me a very, very big lesson in understanding that there is a spectrum, and how do we be now today we call it solutions oriented or whatever.
Yeah.
But at that time, that was really, you needed to get something out, and you were working with very, very hard-headed people that honestly thought the world about themselves. Were fed by awards and this and that to think that, they were, this is what drove them, and you met people who had very, very different motivations, and you needed to find a middle ground. And I think that taught me a lot of skills in managing people and finding a solution that works for people.
And Derek Sivers made a very, very interesting point, right, that I really found it very meaningful. He said that whenever people have a belief about something, when you put any words like I believe, da da
Right.
da da da,
Right.
whatever words you put after belief, typically is because they are not sure of it.
Hmm.
You don't have to say, I believe the sun rise from the east.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the square has 4 sides. That's, I mean, that doesn't make sense at all.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to say, I believe anything, because if something is an objective truth,
Yes.
it's a fact. There's no need for you to have any beliefs around that.
Correct.
So, whenever something is subjective, we tend to overcompensate with the strength of our beliefs, which is why you probably thought, well, people will think the world of themselves, because I think anybody who's in a creative endeavor needs some form of ego, needs a form of a strong ego to be able to believe in the conviction of what they believe in. Otherwise, how are they going to convince people that their design is the best, their ideas are the best? And I think when it comes to advertisement, people often think of advertisement as a very creative industry, and therefore you need the creatives to drive that.
Yes.
But your ability to work with people and their beliefs, and your ability to hold so many different perspectives, right? I can't remember who was it who say the mark of an educated mind is to hold multiple perspectives
Right.
without agreeing with them. And I think your ability to hold so many multiple perspectives, I think was a real superpower.
You were toggling between people that had very, very different beliefs.
Yes, I know.
And you were you were rushing for
Yes.
time. And you really needed to find some way to bring this belief and this belief together and create something that can.
Yes.
And it's not about compromise. I don't think the word is compromise.
No.
I think the word is being solutions oriented and not being binary.
Yeah.
And I think the world we have grown up in has been extremely binary.
Yeah.
It is black or white, A or B, and the reality is our lives are a lot more complicated and more
Yes.
complex than that, right? And how do we find that solution? Anybody who works as account management in the advertising industry, I think that is the number one skill that they bring they bring everywhere else they go in their career. How do you manage people?
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So it's not A or B, but it's got A and B.
Yes, correct.
it's
Or it's part of A and part of B, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not really a kind of compromise. I think it's a co-creation.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely. I think you have hit it completely on the head. It is the co-creation. Yeah. It is not I'm taking your idea and making it less, and taking your idea and making it less. It is, how do we bring both your ideas together and make it more? Yeah.
Okay, great. So
Yeah.
after leaving advertising, where did you go?
After I left advertising, I then went into loyalty marketing. And I was with the consulting company that set up KrisFlyer for Singapore Airlines.
Oh,
so we
wow.
designed the KrisFlyer program, which was amazing learning, extremely taxing, because it was big. It was the first time Singapore Airlines was launching their loyalty program. After I worked there, there was a little bit of this and a little bit of that. In the process, I also got married. I became a mother. There was I took some time off because I wanted to spend time with my daughter when she was young. So I only worked 2 or 3 days a week. So I found positions where I could go in and help organizations set up their marketing departments. At that time, the legal industry was just started to be allowing them to set up marketing departments. So I helped a law firm, and I went in 3 days a week. So that was fantastic for me because I also managed to spend time with my daughter, which is what I really wanted to do. When my daughter was 4 years old, I decided, okay, now it's time to go back full steam ahead. And I think that's the other very, very, very important lesson that I learned and I brought to the workplace, which was I I think that you have a life outside of the office, and you should not be expected to sacrifice your entire life
Yep.
outside of the office just because you are working somewhere. um so when I joined the Singapore Tourism Board, my daughter was 4 years old. I made it a priority that as far as possible, I would leave at 5:30, 6 o'clock, 6:30, whatever, so that I could be home with my daughter. Um, and many years later, a couple of the female employees actually said to me that it gave them, they felt that by signaling that, that I would say, okay, now it's 6 o'clock, I gotta go.
Yep.
My daughter, it gave them
Permission?
the permission, or not so much the permission, but they felt that, okay, it allowed them to also say that, I don't need to be, putting this as a backseat.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe not a technical permission, but really a cognitive, and a
Correct,
kind of
exactly.
psychological permission.
Totally. And female leaders, there's so much that they can bring to other female employees that we don't even think about.
Oh, love
Yeah.
it, love it, love it.
Yeah.
I mean, the image that came to my mind is the irony of you being at the Singapore Tourism Board, heading up the service excellence,
Yes, service quality.
and when you go back home and if you ask your daughter to give you a survey of your work as a mom, and imagine if your daughter is your internal customer, how would she rate you
Yeah.
as a service provider?
Yeah.
How would she rate how you perform as a mom? So
yeah.
right, I think you being able to straddle that balance was a real gift.
Yeah, not easy, and there were many times I couldn't. And as I moved in the organization and I had more and more responsibility, there were many times my husband did have to actually sit me down one time and say, the minute you get home, you don't need to take your laptop out and turn it on. It's pointless if you get home and the first thing you do is take your laptop out and start looking at your emails. Then you're not present as well. And really, this concept of what being present means. What does being present in the workplace mean? What does being present at home mean? This is why with my teams, it was always about, I trust you, and when you need the leeway, I'll give you the leeway. But my expectations of you as far as delivering on your work commitments are really, really high.
Can you share me a little bit about your work in Singapore Tourism Board? Obviously, we are talking about Singapore Tourism Board at a very pivotal and strategic time when Singapore is really going to be positioning itself in a very big way on a world stage as a tourism hub. So tell me a little bit more about the work you do
So I
there.
joined the tourism board just before when they had won the F1, and they were building the 2 integrated resorts. So it was a very, very big time for
Yeah.
tourism. We knew that, we were doing very, very big projects, and they were very important. There were very important commitments that we needed to deliver. So that was wonderful. This whole sense of purpose
Yeah.
was huge. That we all went in really feeling that we were, that bigger sense of purpose. I thought was a wonderful. It's one of the best organizations, honestly, I've worked at. I started as director of service quality. I then moved on to different aspects. I headed up the capability. So I set up the capability building division, which really looked at aspects of productivity, technology, labor policy, tourism labor policy, that kind of thing. So I worked around that. And then I moved on to head the entire business travel and MICE portfolio. MICE is meetings, incentives.
conventions,
etc.,
exhibition.
yeah.
Yep.
And business travel. I headed the team that looked after cruise, and I also looked after health, tourism, and education as well. Yeah.
Wow, sounds
So
like you
it
had a
was
big
very
time.
diverse. Yeah. It was diverse. I mean, I think one of the great things about the Singapore Tourism Board is because they have so much horizontal responsibility, right? Tourism is extremely wide. It's very complex. It allowed us to move and do different things and take on new challenges, and the work was always exciting because of that. Yeah.
I would like to touch on a little bit about customer service because I'm at two minds about it. I personally think that Singapore is a country that works, right? And we prioritize efficiency, effectiveness, but sometimes I feel at the expense of, a certain element of empathy,
Yeah.
for want of a better word, as for a sense of,
Yeah.
humanity
Yeah.
in the way we deliver service.
Yeah.
And I feel that, of course, there's also that whole element around most Singaporean parents would not be proud of saying, hey, my daughter works at a local hotel, or my son works at a local diner. I recall when I was in Australia visiting a friend, she was like, hey, my son works at a local Chinese diner. Shall we head there for dinner tonight? And she said it with so much pride,
Yeah.
beaming from her face. I cannot imagine a Singaporean mom saying, hey, my son works at a local Chinese restaurant. Let's go and eat there.
Mm.
I think I can only imagine there'll be a lot of shame, right? It's
Mm.
like they'll much prefer that, oh, my son works as a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, or an engineer,
Yeah.
rather than, oh, my son works at a local diner.
Yeah.
So I think there's so much, so much dynamics that goes against, putting Singapore on the world map as a place of service excellence. So tell me about what are some of the challenges you had to overcome while you were there in STB.
That was definitely one of the challenges, right? This whole perception that a service career is a career that people who cannot make it undertake, which I think is changing. So maybe let me put it in perspective, right? So if you look at the service levels in Singapore, yes, we will always be efficient. And I think that's a wonderful thing for us, right? The reliability, the efficiency is something that works for Singapore, and I don't think we should, we should be very, very happy that we can offer that. I do worry that we are going down this road of efficiency, and we are starting to equate customer experience or customer service or whatever with efficiency, and efficiency only. And I think that's wrong. So, we organizations keep talking about digital first or digital only, as if, that's all customers want. And I disagree that that's what customers want, because at the end of the day, customers want to feel valued. They want to feel like they made the right choice buying from you because you value them. Now, you value them by offering them efficiency, but you also value them by showing them that you care about their needs, and you care about what they want. And when a problem arises, or when something arises, you're there to solve that problem for them as well. I think that's really, really important. And all these organizations that are so excited about Gen AI, I am too. But they need to understand what is the place of technology, and where does technology play, but where does the human play as well. And I think, we need to have a bigger conversation around that generally as an industry. But going back to this whole concept of the challenges of the service industry, right? I would see young people, like poly students, for example, right? Or O-level students who were very, very smart, like did extremely well in their O-levels. And would want to join a poly because they wanted to do hospitality, very passionate. So this idea that, oh, only the people that cannot make it are the ones that join the service and industry actually is not true, because the young people had a deep passion for the hospitality industry, the tourism industry. The problem we faced is that even a lot of these industries were treating them like cheap labor, and they turned them away, so they would join as interns, and then they would feel like, I'm not learning anything, what is my pathway? That is now 10-15 years ago. I think it has changed, and I think more and more there is this sense, I don't know whether the parent generation has bought into it, but I do think it's changing, and I think things take time to change. But this whole idea about entrepreneurship, service businesses, chefs being like, superstars, all that is slowly changing the service industry. So I'd like to think that as more and more young people join the service industry and create their own service products, create their own little cafes, create, whatever, that there will be some understanding, and we will broaden the definition of what success means, in the long run. But yes, those were definitely some of the perception of a service career was definitely one of the challenges that we faced.
So it seems like there needs to be more of a strategic service blueprinting, a kind of a strategic approach to really map out the entire customer experience.
Correct.
And therefore, part of that service blueprinting then is able to translate the customer experience down to specific touch points,
Correct.
and then specific touch points to be translated in terms of specific skill sets
Correct.
and capabilities and skill stacks
Correct.
that's required of a service or hospitality professional. And in this way, then we can really cascade it down and start these interns in learning about these touch points
Correct.
and the importance of their job.
Correct.
So would you say that there's a strategic approach to service blueprinting in Singapore?
Yes.
Tell
yes.
us
There
more.
wasn't.
There wasn't.
But there
Tell us more.
wasn't probably many years ago. But
Okay.
we then started to build it, right? When service became almost a strategic priority. So Singapore, in that way, I think Singapore is extremely foresighted. There was this movement called GEMS, Go the Extra Mile for Service, and then eventually GEMS Up. And what they did was they brought different government agencies together to look at the different skill sets and how do we then build the different skill sets, right? So at that time, it was called Spring Singapore, right? Looked after SMEs. They developed a program called CCI, customer-centric initiative, which was all about giving companies grants to build up their customer-centric capabilities. Now, that would go all the way from branding, processes, everything. So, that was one government agency. The other government agency would be today at that time it was called Workforce Singapore. Today it's called SSG, I think. They built the training pathway, for service careers, and the Singapore Tourism Board was all about showcasing that a service career can be a good career. And we all worked together. And SMU, which eventually I joined, the Institute of Service Excellence, was all about research and benchmarking and tracking our service metrics. And I think that's the beauty of how Singapore actually comes together and how we work together, because we worked very, very closely. Everybody had their job to do, but we worked together to meet that. And that is why today, when I look at service excellence and I look at service, and I also look at perhaps, yes, a lot of these things, a parent today would probably still prefer their child to be a lawyer, a doctor, whatever. I don't know. I'm sure. But I do feel that some of that mindset is also changing, because a lot of resource has been put to change and to show the potential of some of these careers for people. You know, when I was at the Singapore Tourism Board, we had very, very few local general managers. Today we have several, and many have gone on then to China, to other parts of Asia where they actually are general managers of entire hotels. They built very, very successful careers for themselves.
Absolutely. I remember when I was in a Ritz-Carlton in Shanghai recently for work. I mean, I was staying at a Ritz-Carlton, and the head chef, the executive chef, is from Singapore.
Yes,
And
isn't
so
that
we
amazing?
had like bak kut teh and all that, right, for our meals. And I was very surprised by that. And when I was in Da Nang for vacation with my wife, we stayed in a nice beachside resort, and we had the general manager of the hotel is Singaporean.
Correct.
So I think Singapore does have a really good
Correct.
service brand that we are exporting.
Correct.
I'm
And we are
actually very proud of it.
building and exporting it, right? And
Yeah.
and these are careers that slowly people are realizing that these are successful, careers. These are good careers to build.
Not
It
to
will take
mention-
time.
Not to mention, of course, Singapore Airlines is always a global brand. There's a flag carrier for us, and of course, the Middle Eastern Airlines have really hired a lot of our star employees from Singapore Airlines to help them to set up their own, service blueprints as well.
Absolutely.
I think that's a lot. I think things are moving, and I'm really heartened by that. I think this is some of the things that our government is doing that I think a lot of people are not seeing. And for our listeners who are listening from abroad, I am sure you can really relate to this, because I see many countries are really following in Singapore's footsteps and
Yes.
looking to recreate the same
experience.
I was part of it as well, because I was a corporate trainer in-house for a retail company. I think this is
Yes.
something I don't talk a lot about on my social media and also in my stories, but I was part of that movement
yeah.
towarch service
And
excellence.
and the people that received it, it was very meaningful for them. They were recognized for what they were doing, which I think is a really important part of this whole service journey. Yeah.
That's beautiful. So tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to start your business. And I love the name of the business. It's called Conscious Service.
Mhm.
I love it. I love the word conscious. Yeah. So
Mhm.
tell us a little bit more about your journey to starting your own company.
I think the service environment has changed so much, right? And like I just said, everybody's talking about digital. And for me, digital is great, but designing with empathy is really, really important, even if it's a digital experience. In fact, I feel that empathy is needed more now rather than less. And I suppose, during COVID as well, which is kind of like a distant memory for everybody,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
like, we've kind of forgotten a lot of the lessons that we learned in COVID. But I saw so many businesses shut down when a black swan event like this hit them, right? Yet there were so many other businesses that were doing extremely that built new revenue streams, built adjacent revenue streams, and were doing extremely well. And I felt that there is a need to understand where the customers are, where the consumers are going. And that's really what I want to do with my business. I felt that there was an opportunity. I also wanted a bit more. I've been in the corporate workforce for over 25 years, and I felt that I want to work on projects that I really, really, really feel very passionate about in this space, which I think having conscious service allowed me to do. The reason why I called it conscious service is exactly because I feel intentionality is so important. Service doesn't happen by accident. It's not a matter of having the right customer service person. It is a very, very delivering good service is actually extremely complex.
Yep.
And I feel that I love that there is Professor Frances Frey from Harvard Business School. She was brought into Uber when Uber was having, all their massive problems, right? She coined the term which I really love, which is service excellence is service excellence equals design multiplied by culture.
Wow.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. And it's very, very true. It is how do you design it and how do you build a culture? And that's an area which has to be very intentionally done, right? And that's the area that I want to do a lot more work around. Um, and the work that I want to do is not just on actually how do you build the service processes. The culture part of it is really, really important. And today, obviously, a lot of the experiences are going digital. A lot of organizations, we use our apps, as a first touch point. A lot of organizations are transforming really, really fast. They're changing the way they do things. How do you bring the organization along with you, right? What are the mindsets that in this digital first age? What are the mindsets that we need to build in order to really thrive in this way? Because it requires a new way of working together, I think, and working across. So I'll give you an example. All of us shop now, on say Lazada or whatever, right? Shopee,
Amazon.
whatever. Yeah. So it's e-commerce.
Yep.
That is a merchant, because they are marketplaces, right?
Yep.
So there's a whole bunch of different merchants. So whilst I'm working with Lazada, I'm actually now shopping from a different bunch of merchants. Then the delivery person is completely different. It's all kind of chunked up.
Yep.
And it does bring up a lot of issues like who owns that customer journey?
Yep.
Where is the ownership? Where are the issues? How do organizations actually build good customer experiences in these kind of new business models? And I think there's a lot of discussion that needs to be had around this. It does bring up a very important responsibility, I think, that we have as customers when we interact with service staff. I think, it's a really, really tough job.
Yeah.
It's hard, dealing with people, and I think we don't give them enough respect.
Yes.
And can you imagine, that I can't remember who it was that said, senior management person, right? That senior management, they think the service job is actually very easy. It's not. And I can't remember who said it, but this was wonderful. She said, so senior management, they went frontline to taste what it's like, to be frontline, right?
Yep.
At a bank or something. And she said, I went in, I thought it was going to be like a breeze. She said by the time like 11 o'clock in the morning hit or something, I was screaming back at the at the customers, because I was so frustrated. They have got such a tough job to do, and we as customers, I think, should actually remember more often how difficult their job is. It's they have to deal with and they have to deal with the customers, and many times they don't have access to information. The processes are not well designed for them. Sometimes when I'm asked to come in to speak about service or whatever, right, if the senior leadership is not involved, I'm not interested. To me, service is a senior leadership issue. It is not a frontline service staff issue. The senior leader, it's extremely important for the senior leadership team to understand how important this concept of service is to their organization. If they don't see it as a competitive advantage for them, well, then it's not going to permeate down the organization at all, because they're not going to put the resources against it. Yeah.
Service is not an act. Service is a posture towards
Correct.
life.
Correct.
When you have a posture of service, the operative question you're asking is, how can I serve you and make your life better today?
Correct.
In this moment in time.
Correct.
And if everybody has such an orientation or such a posture towards life, I think the world will be a way better place than
Agree.
it is.
Agree.
And I think we really shouldn't talk about service as an action
Agree.
or as a job.
I'm with you 100%.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about this book that you have written, right? What compelled you to write this book?
So I started actually writing it during COVID, when I saw, so many of these businesses for so many years shutting down. And like I said, I saw others actually succeeding. And to me, it was interesting to see, why were some able to weather something like this and some were not, right? And the whole idea behind the book is, how do you prepare for transformation? Because transformation is happening. So you can't close your eyes and bury your head under the sand. Your consumers are changing, and how do you stay relevant to them? Hence the title, "Stay Relevant to Stay Profitable." Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mentioned the book, right? I was just holding the book, right? But I realized that our listeners at home have no context over this book. So the title of the book is "Stay Relevant to Stay Profitable," and I service transformation strategies to grow your customers in unprecedented times. I think there's never been a more timely time to write such a book, and I really agree. I read a lot of the book and I really like what you have just mentioned.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And there's a couple of questions I'd just like to ask you about.
Sure.
And it's sort of related also to wholehearted leadership, right? You did mention that service starts from the top.
Yes.
So you talk about the gap model of service quality, and one of the
Yes.
best way to assess whether we are giving service quality is to assess the gaps.
Correct.
And one of the first gap that you mentioned, I was like, oh wow. The first gap is the knowledge or listening gap,
Correct.
right? Why is there a listening gap? Why do organizations fail so miserably at listening to their customers' needs?
Correct.
Why?
And because we are in an organization where people make assumptions, and the flow of information does not get to the right people as well, right? So in the gap model of service quality, which I think is, just the simplest and best way to as a starting point when you're looking, they identified 5 gaps, right? There's process gaps. There's the you don't train your employees well enough, so the employees
Information
don't
gap.
know the information gap. The biggest gap is obviously the listening gap, the communication
Yeah.
gap, because that is where it always breaks down. It always breaks down because of a lack of communication. Now, it can break down because the leadership team is not listening to their employees. In Singapore, many years ago, they had something called WIT, Work Improvement Teams,
Yes.
right? Where they said, actually, it starts from the ground. How many leaders actually, the people on the ground are the ones facing the issues? How many leaders actually listen to their own employees on the ground facing the issues? They make a lot of assumptions. They assume that, my customers are going to like this. My customers are going to be fine with this. My customers are not going to be too bothered by this. There are gaps because information does not get up to the leadership team to make decisions, because there's no psychological safety. People who face issues on the ground cannot permeate the information up to the leadership teams because they don't feel safe saying that these are issues on the ground. Every facet of the listening gap or the communication gap is a function of the inability in an organization to communicate with one another. And invariably, that becomes the biggest gap that the organization faces. Yeah.
It's not worthwhile to speak up.
Correct.
What's the point of speaking up, right? It's like, it's my suggestion or my ideas are not going to be taken at all.
Absolutely. You know, there is an analogy to this in customer experience when we measure complaints, right? And at the Institute, we were doing very, very big studies and very, very big research projects, right? And when we would measure complaints, instead of asking them like, you know, have you complained, have you not complained? If they said, no, we didn't complain, then we went one more level down and we said, okay, you did not complain because you had no reason to complain, or was it too difficult, or there was no point in complaining, right? No reason to complain is good. Too difficult, no point, you have a problem on your hands, right?
Yes.
And, you know, the number of customers that would say, no point or too difficult, you know, to complain. I'm not... And you know, you know that these are customers that are not only not going to come back to you, but they're probably advocating to their family and friends against you. You know, so just because you don't have complaints doesn't mean you've created an environment where it doesn't mean that your service is so good that people don't need to complain. Sometimes you make it so... Sometimes you signal to your customers you are actually not interested in their complaints.
There's so many things that come up here, right? It's the idea of the emperor has no clothes, and you have no clothes, but people wouldn't tell you that you have no clothes on.
Correct.
And of course, just because you have had no complaints, you have had no opportunity for you to have organization learning on how you can better serve your customers. And this whole idea around having no complaints at all is also, I believe that, you know, energy cannot be destroyed or created. It can only be transformed from one form to another. Like,
very nice.
I'm sounding very, very physical.
Yes,
you
are very metaphysical.
Metaphysical, but I mean, I am not a physics graduate. This will let you know. But I think one of the law of thermodynamics, I can't remember what it is, but the whole idea of, if people don't complain to you, then where does that energy flow to, right? The energy cannot be just destroyed overnight, suddenly, just like that, right? So obviously the energy goes to social media.
Correct.
Energy goes to, you know, complaining to their friends, to tell other people, to advocate against you.
Correct. And we're seeing more and more of that, right?
Yes.
And you know, the term complaint in the first place actually is kind of problematic, right?
Yeah.
Because if you are a great customer-centric organization, we're talking about customer centricity now.
Yeah.
If you're a great customer-centric organization, actually you want all kinds of information from your customers. Even if they're unhappy, that's such a great source of feedback to you. You know, it tells you certain things that gives you a guide.
Yes.
You know? But again, it's changing our mindset. It's the label, right? And how do we view things without being so defensive all the time?
I think at the end of the day, when it comes to complaints, right, it's really I think a lot of it is our own, you know, our own defense mechanisms. It's almost like a complaint is a negative thing, right? It's almost like fight or flight kind of response.
Correct.
And it's something that we try to avoid at all cost.
Agree.
I think a lot of complaints come down to, I mean, I'm widening the conversation here, but it really comes down to conflict avoidance. Comes down to, you know, we just want everybody to be happy all the time, but we know that life is not always happy camp.
Totally.
And so when we hear some complaints, we're like, oh, you know, we try to hush it. We don't try to say anything about it. But I think when customers complain, it's because they have a need that's unmet.
Correct.
And it's good for you to know that need that's unmet, rather than if they don't complain, they become apathetic.
Correct.
They become indifferent. And I think that, you know, indifference is even worse than if customers complained.
Totally agree. Couldn't agree more with you.
Well,
Couldn't agree more. I mean, the fact that a customer complains to you tells you that the customer cares about your product or your service. You know, why would the customer want to expand effort to complain if they didn't care? You know, if there is just apathy and you're not getting any information at all, I think it's far more worrying for a business than a customer that actually makes the effort to complain, because complaining or giving feedback, as I like to call it, takes effort.
Absolutely. And you also did mention on the chapter on transformational leadership, which is of course the chapter I'm most interested in.
Of course.
But of course, you also mentioned throughout the book this same issue that happened all the time: silos happening within organizations, right?
Yes.
So, what are your best recommendations for breaking down silo mentality?
I think it's it's really really hard. It's really complex, and the reality is that we have all grown up uh, uh, with a certain mindset about how organizations work, and hence how organizations are structured, right? So we need to break that silo mentality by really really not just using words like collaboration and whatever, but really starting with our own actions as leaders, you know. So if you want to break the silo mentality, you know, put your ego aside, and start talking to other teams and other leaders in other teams, and see how you can start working together with them, you know. Design the KPIs such that we stop rewarding, you know, we have designed our incentive mechanisms to actually identify silos, you know.
Yeah.
You know, you know that there's so many structures in organizations that go against the grain of actually what they keep saying now they want to do, you know. um, you keep saying that we want to reward collaboration, but how many organizations have actually structured their KPIs to reward collaboration? You know, you're still structured on what did I do, what did I contribute. When we have in the insurance industry, it's still the $1 million round table, which is very individual. You know, it's my achievement. Um, we can't keep saying we want to break down the silos, but we still have all these processes in place which are very silo oriented. Yeah.
Great, great, great. So I want to talk to you about this part here about writing your book, right? To what extent has writing your book helped you to find your voice?
That's an interesting question. I have to say the journey to writing the book was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. Putting your own thoughts out there is really hard. I mean, I don't know how you run a podcast, because you you are big, you know. The first thought that would prevent me, I would write one chapter, or sorry, one paragraph actually. Some days I would just write one paragraph and shut it and
Yeah.
be like, I can't do this anymore. Sorry. Some days I would write one paragraph and shut it and be like, I can't do this anymore, because I was so plagued by, why am I writing this? You know, are people going to laugh when they read? You know, are they going to disagree with me? Um, you know, i- w- writing a book, running a podcast means that you need to be comfortable with being somewhat vulnerable,
Yeah.
and comfortable with the fact that people are going to read what you write, and there are many that are going to disagree with you, and that's okay. We live in a world where people agree and people disagree. Um, but you do feel very vulnerable when you have your voice out there,
Yeah.
you know, a representation of what you feel. So my publisher had to tell me, there's no wrong or right. It's your perspective, you know, of the world, of the way you see the world of service and what needs to happen. And I think along the way, you learn to trust your voice, and you learn to live with the fact that this is my voice, and my voice has a place in the entire dictum of voices. You know, yeah.
You know, Nita, your voice definitely has a lot of gravitas. I don't just mean your physical voice, but really all the stories that you have to share, from your experiences in advertising to your experiences working at those high level projects in Singapore Tourism Board. I think you had first row seat in watching all of these historical moments in Singapore come to pass. And you have taken such leadership positions. You have really grabbed the bulls by the literal horns.
I had good teams.
You
I
had good
always
teams.
had great teams,
But
and
you
I
are also a
always
great
worked
leader.
with great people.
You're
You
also a
know,
great leader. You make great teams.
I've also been very fortunate to have good people that worked around me. You know, I'd be the first. I'm often when I think about, whether it was at STB, whether it was at SMU, I actually had great people working with
But here's
me.
the thing, right?
Yeah.
These are stories that if I don't interview you, or if you don't write it into a book, or you don't share openly, will be stories that will be kept away forever.
Yes.
And I think that these are stories that are so inspiring. They are stories that illuminate and share very diverse perspective, which is what the world needs today, right?
Agree.
I think a lot of us are really living in an echo chamber. It's hard because at the end of the day, we are in an echo chamber and we only know what we know. And then what happens is that we become, strengthened by our own ignorance, by our own Dunning-Kruger effect, to know just a little piece of the world and think that you know everything.
Correct.
But your perspectives are what I always enjoy. The talking to you has always feel like it's like walking through a kaleidoscope and an exhibition of different perspectives, and I think that it is so beautiful. I think you are like an artist in an executive leader's clothes.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. But I think it's the conversation that we had when we met. It's how do you connect the dots?
Yes.
I really think connecting dots is so important. And obviously my interest is in the service space, right? Customer experience. But customer experience cannot be delivered unless you have wholehearted leadership. You just can't, right? In the book, I talk about the service profit chain, which is a model, right? Which talks about, if you want to deliver great customer experience, you got to look after your people in the organization, because that's how the chain works. And those are the dots I think that more and more organizations need to connect. So if we look after our people, what does looking after your people mean? What does it mean? It means that they are a composite of their entire lives, and you cannot say leave this part of your life at home. You're at the workplace. I'm not interested in your personal life. They bring their personal lives into the workplace. We're humans.
Yep.
And really, I guess, just to round it off, I do feel that kindness is a word that is not used enough in the workplace. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're almost coming to the end of the podcast interview, and we'll just usually end our podcast with some quick fire questions for our guests.
Mm-hmm.
And so quick fire questions are just quick 1 to 2 sentences answers to these questions. So are you ready, Neeta?
I guess so.
Okay, bring
As
it on.
ready as I'll ever be. So
Yeah, exactly right. Stay relevant. Stay agile.
Stay agile.
Right, so first question. What is the most powerful question you have ever been asked before?
What is the most powerful question I've ever been asked before? The most powerful question for me is why? Why? And if I'm if I have a perspective, why? Go down deeper. I think that's the most underrated question, actually.
Beautiful. Second question. Who is a mentor or supporter who has made the biggest difference in your life?
There are a couple of people that I worked with that really, really, I think, helped me. I would say the person that had made the biggest difference is my inspiration, or really the person that forced me to write the book, Professor Jerry George. He really, really, I think, forced me to write the book, So I wrote the book starting off feeling like I can't do it. It's too momentous a task. And he really kind of basically said, get on with it, Sometimes you need supporters or mentors who just tell you, get on with it.
What is one of the most courageous things you have done in your life that has made all the difference?
I don't know whether it would have made all the difference. It's too early to say, but I think, I've been in the corporate world for so long. The thought of not being a corporate person was really, really scary. So I did think many times that I want to set up my own, and I never did it, which tells you something. I really believe timing. Everything is about timing, and finding the courage to do things is about timing as well.
You are an extremely courageous woman. Thank you very much for coming on the Wholehearted Leadership Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It was a thought-provoking conversation for me too.
Thank you.
Which is what I always have with you.
Thank you, Neeta.
All right, thank you.